Well, Craig, I'm so glad that you could be here and that we can have this conversation. And I appreciate that probably, 5 years ago maybe?
Yeah.
We connected, and it wasn't that long after that one of these tragic deaths happened, and we're like, okay, Craig, talk to me.
Right. Yeah, I remember that. Like it was yesterday almost.
Yeah. And I just remember so many things that I was thankful for. One, your willingness to have a conversation. And two, just that we could be honest and kind of ask questions and say real things to each other.
Right, exactly.
So I appreciate that. Appreciate you being here. And for the sake of what we're doing, I'm going to kind of push pause on me talking.
Okay.
And I'm going to appreciate if you would read James chapter 2, those first few verses for us.
Okay, we're going to go to verse 7, correct?
Yep.
James chapter 2, verse 7, or 1 through 7, and it reads, "My brothers, show no partiality as you hold faith in your Lord Jesus Christ, the Lord of glory. For if a man wearing a gold ring and fine clothing comes into your assembly, and a poor man in shabby clothing also comes in, and if you pay attention to the one who wears the fine clothing and say, 'You sit here in a good place,' while you say to the poor man, 'You stand over there,' or 'Sit down at my feet,' have you not then made distinctions among yourselves and become judges with evil thoughts? Listen, my beloved brothers, has not God chosen those who are poor in the world to be rich in faith and heirs of the kingdom, which he has promised to those who love him? But you have dishonored the poor man. Are not the rich the ones who oppress you and the ones who drag you into court? Are they not the ones who blaspheme the honorable name by which you were called?"
Thanks. Well, Craig, I'm curious what I know you. What's some of your backstory? I know you. Your congregation knows you, but only a handful of my congregation has been over to St. Paul.
Right.
So what's your backstory?
Backstory. I'm a kid from the inner city of Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Grew up in the inner city. Had the opportunity to go to the suburbs to go to high school, where I was basically introduced to people who didn't look like me. Shortly after that, graduating high school, and I'm just giving you the fast version of this, graduating high school, went to Alabama State University, which was a HBCU, which is still a HBCU. Went there my freshman year and found out that was kind of out of my element. So I came back home and went to a small 2-year school in Palatine, Illinois, called William Rainey Harper Junior College. From there, life had its ups and downs, its twists and turns, got into some trouble, doing a lot of things I should not have been doing. And God put the military in my mind. So I ended up joining the military, left Milwaukee, and I haven't lived there in over 30 years.
Wow.
I did 20 plus years in the military, infantry soldier. I've done 2 tours in Iraq, been all over Europe training, training with different militaries from the Ukraine, did Bosnia, did Kosovo, and retired at Fort Lewis. And then my last 3 years in the military, I was an equal opportunity advisor for the Army, which actually pretty much helped kind of shape my wheelhouse, so to speak. And then just to digress a little bit, I actually started pastoring in Iraq.
Wow.
Peers chose me to be the lead pastor of the gospel service. Chad, we started with like the first Sunday, it was like, I'm like, this is not gonna work. We had like 10 people in there. And the next thing you know, over the course of the next several months, it just started growing and growing to the point we had over 100 plus military and civilians coming to service. And then from there, came back here and was in Lacey, Washington, where we retired at. And then got a call one day from my pastor, said, "Do you think you're ready to pastor?" And I said, "That is not a question for me. Do you think I can pastor?"
That's a great response. It's a good question and a great
exactly.
response.
And so he said, "I think you're ready." He said, "There's a church in Portland. They're looking for pastors. It's a small church." He said, "They haven't had a pastor in about 3 years." He said, "I think you might be able to, do some things there. Are you interested?" And I was like, "If you think I'm ready, I'll put my application in. So
Yeah.
I put in my resume, and a year and a half later, they called me.
Yeah.
So it was a long process, but I'm here, and I've been at St. Paul for 5 years now.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'm thankful. I'm thankful and blessed by them calling you.
Yeah.
And the way we sort of met, and just for the sake of everyone else, was St. Paul,
Right.
and the building where you all worship was the building that our church started in.
Right.
And so when we moved into our current building, your forefathers purchased the building
Right.
from our forefathers, I guess, and just thankful for that connection. But I stopped one day on my way home from a Sunday service and saw some folks outside and thought, well, I'll stop by and introduce myself.
Right.
And that was the day they had decided to call you.
Right.
And
Yeah.
so felt like the Lord was directing our steps.
Yeah. And you know what? It's funny how God works, because the day that they actually called me, I was actually right in the middle of typing a letter to pull my name from the selection process.
Wow.
Because it had taken so long. It was over a year. The process took over a year. And I was like, I put my whole life on hold waiting to hear.
Yeah.
I wanted to go back to school. Me and my wife wanted to do some more traveling.
Okay.
And that day, I was getting ready to push send, and my phone rings.
Man.
And it was one of the deacons, and he was like, do you still want to be the pastor at this church? And I said, what do you mean want to be? He said, we're choosing you, and if you would take it, we'll be honored to have you. And I said, well, I'm going to have to call you back. I need to go talk to my wife and call my pastor.
Right.
And then the rest is history.
Yeah. So you digress to the military in your story, but I have a couple of questions, because
Sure.
I think that time seems pretty significant for you.
Oh, definitely.
In all the cross training that you did with other militaries from other nations, seems like that brought a lot of diversity into
definitely.
an understanding of some military practices and things. But there was some other specific training or intentional training that kind of. So what's some of the direction that the military?
I mean, when you
helped
think
you with?
about it, the military, one of the terms we used when I became an equal opportunity advisor that I still use now, the military is what we would call a tossed salad. Because you have all these individual vegetables in a salad, but collectively they make the salad, right?
Yeah.
And so we all blend in to make the Army. That's one reason for uniformity. Everybody in the Army wears the same uniform, from the hat all the way to the boots. Even the socks and the colors of underwear that we wear are all uniformed. And so what it showed me is that regardless of my background, be it my religious background, my race, my gender, I'm part of this army where there's people from everywhere, not only all over the United States, but some from around the world who are a part of our army. So we're a toss salad, or a melting pot of people put together to form this strong unit. And so everybody is valued.
Yeah.
Regardless of your economic background, everybody is valued. And you'd be surprised that there are a lot of rich young men that come, and women that come into the military. And then you definitely have a lot of poor, but we all work together, for one common cause, and that's what I see.
Yeah.
And I've seen that for a long time. One of the things my father told me is when I was going to be leaving the neighborhood to go to the school in the suburbs, and I told him the day that he was taking me, I said, I'm kind of nervous. And he said, why are you nervous? He said, you're outgoing. He said, you're charming, and I was like, okay, my dad's telling me I'm charming. And he said, you shouldn't have any problems. He said, but I want you to understand something. He said, I want you to understand that there is no difference between them and you. And he used those terms. He said, because he said, there's one thing that you all do the same each and every day. And I said, what's that? He said, you put your pants on one leg at a time. And he said, that's all you need.
Yeah.
He said, other than that, you be yourself.
Yeah.
You make friends. And he said, as your time goes there, you'll start to learn and see things. He said, but you have the best of both worlds. He said, you're going, so to speak, to another world each and every morning that you're going to spend 8 to 10 hours at, but then you're going to come back to the neighborhood, and you're going to see a difference in the way people live and the way people communicate, and all those things. And so I really paid attention to that my entire life, and that helped me in the military. It helped me in college. It's helping me here, in Portland. being that, a kid from the inner city of Milwaukee, where we have like the worst zip code in all the entire nation.
Really?
Yeah, the zip code I grew up in.
Wow.
And so to come from there to even, Chad, this is mind blowing that God would have me preaching, looking from where I came from to where I am now. So everything that happened in my life from going to, being bused to a school outside of my neighborhood, going to college, realizing that the HBCU I went to was a little bit too much for me. That I had to digress and try something a little bit smaller. Joining the military, getting out of trouble, joining the military, and God just orchestrating things step by step. And when I look over and I look back to see where I came from and how he put it together, I said, this had to be a plan. There is no way that any of this stuff just happened.
No, not at all. Not at all. And I'll just give a quick sense of myself. I feel the same way in many ways. Like, so many times I drive around the neighborhood, I walk down the sidewalk, I go to the school, wherever I am, and I think, how does a little scrawny, skinny white kid from really a farming community up in Northwest Washington end up in what's considered the urban core of Portland? Lord, how did I end up here?
Man.
And yet, I feel like God has me and certainly you where we are for some reason and for a work to be done.
Definitely.
And I think a match with our congregations and a match with the greater community.
Right.
So I'm thankful for that. Something you said triggered a thought for me that relates to the text.
Okay.
When you talked about, kind of the different kinds of people that come into the military, and that there's really, everyone has they're a different ingredient in the salad.
Right, exactly.
But without that ingredient, you don't have a full salad.
That's it, exactly.
And I guess as I'm looking at just these few verses of this text, there's almost some of that in this description that James gives us.
It definitely is, yeah.
Like, you got rich, you got poor. Don't show any preference to one over the other.
Right.
Whether someone has or doesn't have, but what is it that's at the core of what we ought to be concerned about? It's faith.
It's faith, exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
So when we meet and we talk and we sit down, and I recognize your faith.
Right.
Hopefully you see solid faith in me, and we can unite under it and in that.
Definitely connect.
Right?
What do they say? Try the Spirit by the Spirit.
Ah.
And that is that interconnection. Because I believe when you and I met, we definitely connected on a different level than probably what we expected. Normally when you meet, you meet pastors. Because I will tell you honestly, some of the pastors that I met when I got here, just the ones that are just within, say our fellowship, I didn't connect with them the way I connected with you. And I think because of our like-mindedness and looking at ministry, and then just looking at community, and then just our backgrounds are similar. Yeah. If you think about it.
I don't know how.
I mean, you came from your parents. Now, were you in a dual family home?
Yeah.
You had your mom and your dad?
My family dynamic was a little disrupted. So my parents divorced when I was 9, 10 years old.
The exact same age as me. My mother and father divorced when I was 9. So I think they were just, and then we both love sports.
Yeah.
And so, there was a different level of connection. And then I think
we got cool sneakers on.
Yeah, we wear cool sneakers all the time. And I believe that, there was more to our connection to just, the surface. Hey, one pastor meeting a new pastor coming into the city. Yep. And so with the connection of St. Paul and University Park, you guys used to being in the building. Now we're in the building and you're here. And just all of that, I think, again, you could not have planned this. God has his hands in all of this. And so.
Well, and I think of what has transpired even since that first meeting, right? That, St. Paul has had a couple of things here. Your 3-on-3 basketball tournament, the health and wellness, the clinic, and that.
Which I have not won yet in 2 years.
We'll work on that. We'll work on that. I don't know. The time might be working against us.
Right.
But we'll see what we can do. But even, Craig, I'll share this with some delicacy, but
Okay.
but even the fact that you approached me and asked if I could would be available to counsel another member of your family.
Oh yeah.
I can't tell you how much of an honor that was for me, knowing that you have lots of other people that you could ask.
Right.
That just, man, I was like, yeah, I'll clear my schedule. If whatever I can
Right,
throw
right.
off, I'll do that, and I'll be there.
Yeah, I mean, and that was actually, you were when we talked about it. And for those of you who know, he counseled my daughter and her former husband, but you were the first person that came to mind, because we wanted somebody who didn't know them, number one, who would look at them through honest eyes and ask the hard questions. As a father, I couldn't put myself in that position, because I know I would be very hard on the young man.
Sure.
Period. Hey, you're getting ready to, marry my daughter. So I would be very hard, but I needed somebody who was going to be straight up and honest and hold them to task. And so you were that person. I mean, definitely.
Yeah.
And plus, my daughter loves you anyway, so.
Well, and you and her and your family, and
Right.
But I feel like that's something to acknowledge, just the significance of those kinds of relationship
Yeah.
things that we leverage over the course of time.
Yeah, for sure.
I have a quote. Well, I'm paraphrasing.
Okay.
Right. So, Dr. Tony Evans posted a video sometime, maybe a week or two ago, and I just was late to the party a little bit, but
Okay.
he made a comment that I sort of took and paraphrased and sort of made my own. So I'm going to read that, and maybe we can just kind of dialogue about that a little bit.
Okay.
He said this, you can't expect the White House or the State House to fix a problem that first needs to be fixed in the church house and in my house.
Okay.
What do you think about that?
I think he hit the nail right on the head with that quote. One of the things that I'm a firm believer in is that no matter where you have gone, you're a product of somewhere. I'm a product of Milwaukee. I'm a product of my parents' house. I'm a product of parents who were married, and I'm a product of divorced parents. I'm an inner city kid, and I believe that you are shaped by the environment in which you come from. Some things in my environment wasn't cool. Now that I look back on it, and I was like, wow, I can't believe, I was able to do some of these things. And one of the things I've realized, even before pastoring, is that if I don't have the right upbringing in my house, how can I be effective in the church house? How can I be effective in the schoolhouse? Because the issues that I have in my environment follow me. And if I don't make a change or realize that I have some issues, then everything that I touch from that point on, I can contaminate. Yeah. It's kind of like we're going through coronavirus now, and they're constantly telling us to wash our hands, because if we don't, we're going to contaminate something or somebody else, right, or we're going to pick up a contaminant from somewhere. So he's saying basically to me is that make sure your house is fixed first, because your house being fixed has a ripple effect on every other house that you enter into. And so we can't expect the White House to fix our internal issues. We can't expect our local government to fix some of the internal issues, especially when it comes to race. Yeah. Those are things that we have to fix at the grassroots. And as you said, we're talking about James, and one of the things I thought about Moses said, he said, love your neighbor as you love yourself. And so if we could basically exude that type of love towards one another, then that statement that Tony Evans made, we actually erase that. Yeah. Because we're looking at each other through the eyes of love. We don't see color. Yep. Where actually it says somewhere in James, I think it says something about looking through. And so you're looking through the color of the skin, and you're looking at the person's heart. And if we could just, I would say, look at each other's hearts versus skin color, because we're all the same. When God created us, he created us. I mean, our DNA is different,
Sure.
right? But he created you as a man. Your skin just happens to be lighter than mine. And that's basically what it is. I mean, if we go back and we look historically, biblically, and we look at the way the tribes were formed and who came out of what, who went where, and why my skin is more melanated than yours, why my nose may be wider than yours and yours is more pointier. I mean, there's a lot of scientific things that they said. They said my nose is wider because of the air we would breathe, because it was hot and humid. So that breathing in the hot, humid air, having a wider nose actually cools the air going into your lungs. And then I learned that for my unmelanated or not as melanated brothers and sisters with pointier noses, because they were in colder climates, their noses or nostrils were narrower, because when they breathed in the cold air, it helped warm the air before it went in their lungs.
Interesting.
So
God's creation is amazing.
Exactly.
Right?
I mean, we're filters.
Yeah.
You know, we're human filters. And so to be able to look at each other from the standpoint of what the Bible says, and if we talk about, you know, our country being built on the cornerstone of our relationship with Christ, then why hasn't it flowed through every building that was built?
Yeah.
Love your neighbor as yourself.
Yeah. I find that statement also, for me, if I'm looking kind of from where I'm standing and looking into it, I think there's a tendency to want to displace the guilt off of me and to put it on somewhere or someone else. So it's easier for me to point at the White House or the State House and say, you all need to fix this,
right?
Rather than to look at me and say, you know, I'm kind of part of the problem here. Here's my contribution. And anytime I counsel someone, a couple or you know, someone who's in conflict, it's like, okay, the other person might be 98% at fault, but what's your 2%?
Exactly. Because everybody gives into the whatever the issue is.
Yeah. But even sometimes I've counsel with people, and it's really hard for them to acknowledge their 2%.
Oh yeah, yeah, because we like to place blame on each other versus taking responsibility for our piece in it. One of the things that I think about that is that one of the issues that we have as a people is that when I was in EO school, one of the instructors said that the reason that we will never be able to fix the race issue in America is because we are afraid to sit at the table and talk about it. He said to have that honest, hard conversation. He said because normally, if we look at it from, say, a black and white issue, is that the majority of blacks are speaking from a place of pain.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
And rightfully so.
Right. And so a lot of times being able to sit at the table, the person receiving that can't really take it because they're reflecting back and they're looking like, you know, and we're talking about ancestrally, that they look back and like, wow, I can't believe that, you know, my ancestors, you know, actually did some of these things. And it's a hard conversation to swallow. But yet we also have to understand, you know, from the black standpoint, how you may feel in that conversation. So everybody's feelings is on the table, but how do we have this conversation without really beating the other person to death, so to speak?
Okay.
You know what I'm saying? Because
that's a strong statement. That's a strong way to, like, word choices.
Yeah, I guess you're right.
But it's not inaccurate, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to look at it like that, yeah, it's not. And so when I think about that, if we could have that conversation, you know, and to be able to see, you know, me being able to understand how you view it, and then you being able to understand how I felt it. You know, and if those two things could marry together, we could have that conversation. And it's not about a conversation, okay, all right, well, we're going to pay you back for all the time that basically, and I'll use this term based on what happened to Brother George Floyd. We can look at it from the point that you've always had your knee on my neck. Or do we look at it, what do we do to move forward from here? You know, like we see a lot of people taking statements back that they've said in the past. People are, you know, moving things around, but how long is that going to last? And is that the true fix?
Right.
Yeah, we can move around. We can start moving people into different positions, people of color in positions they've never had before. But how long does that last? You know, am I truly loving my neighbor as I love myself, or if I'm just, or am I just sympathizing with them or right now and pacifying them so we can get going to the next step?
Yeah. The pacifying is a key word. Like that's like the babyest step, right? A pacifying step. Or am I trying to remove the discomfort of the moment?
Exactly.
And
erase my guilt, so to speak.
Yeah, for what's happened in the past.
For what's happened in the past.
But how does that then, does that have any change or impact on the future, other than I better not mess up and say stuff like that again? Does it really change my heart?
Exactly.
Right?
And that's where it is. And I believe the trouble we have, it's not a mind thing, but it is a heart thing.
Yeah.
You know, and if we looked at it from, again, the standpoint of, man, I tell my church all the time, St. Paul, that did you know that you were God's favorite? That each one of you are God's favorite. And for a while I would say that, and they would look at me kind of weird. What do you mean I'm God's favorite? I was like, you're God's favorite. I said, don't you understand that, yeah, I know if we look at it, the big picture, he died. He sent his son Jesus to die for all of us. And I said, but don't you know that he looked at you personally when he made that decision to give up Jesus for you? I said, so you would have to be his favorite for him to make that decision. And he made that decision for all of us.
Yeah.
You know, and so in that, we should be able to look at each other as being God's favorite, that we're equal. God doesn't treat us any differently. We created the statuses.
Yeah.
We created that.
Yeah, 100% right. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you have any other thoughts from James 2 that relate?
Well, one of the things it says, and I'm looking at verses pretty much 5 through probably around 8, and it talks about, there's actually 3 things that I actually saw in that.
Wait, you're not preparing a sermon?
No. Well,
I mean,
I'm probably going to use this on Sunday. But there's 3 things that I saw in that, and just that particular from verses 5 through 11, that one of the things I saw is prejudice is not true of God. The second thing I saw is God isn't concerned about wealth or poverty, but about the condition of a person's soul.
Yep.
And then thirdly, James is saying that prejudice is sinful because it goes against the scriptures.
Yeah.
Showing partiality is a violation of the law.
Yeah.
God's law. I mean, it's there. James is saying this. And, you know, James could really say some stuff that kind of gets you in the gut.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, if you think about those things, prejudice is not of God. So if we consider ourselves to be Christians and to have a relationship with Christ, not a religionship with Christ, but a relationship with Christ, then we're supposed to be like-minded of Christ. Shouldn't we be following the same principles or values that James is putting out right here?
Yeah.
God is not prejudiced, so why are you? You know?
Yep.
He's not concerned with how wealthy you are. He's not concerned with how poor you are.
Nope.
Because he can change all of that in the blink of an eye, snap of a finger.
That's right.
And then we should be following his law, because hate is a sin. Right? So, I mean, and we have Christian brothers and sisters who are part of the problem.
Yeah. Oh,
you know?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
On any
both
side.
sides,
On any
exactly.
side. There aren't just, I don't see this where there's just 2 sides.
Right.
There's all kinds of stuff. I appreciate that. That'll preach.
Yeah.
Right? That'll preach.
Yeah, it will preach.
That will preach. That's good. I appreciate that. And I think one of the, I go to guys that are smarter than me.
Okay.
Right? And begins this, kind of translates this Greek word, right? The favoritism or prejudice, whatever.
Yeah.
Some translations do it differently, but Doug Moo says that it literally means receiving the face.
Yes.
Right? It's first used in the New Testament as a literal rendering of the Old Testament Hebrew language for partiality. Mm-hmm. To receive the face is to make judgments and distinctions based on external considerations such as physical appearance, social status, or race.
Right.
This God never does.
That is so true.
Basically, Craig, you agree with a really smart guy.
That's good.
He agrees with you.
Yeah, like mine's
Yeah,
alike.
he agrees with you. A really smart guy.
All right.
One of the questions that I sent you earlier today was, what do you say to your congregation about race? I mean, these are really kind of have been some tumultuous years.
Right.
But especially this last couple of weeks has just our hearts have been torn out as we've seen so many different things as a result of George Floyd's life being taken.
Right. The one thing that I think that sticks out to me that I've probably said to my congregation several times, and again, same thing, love your neighbor as yourself. I've said that. I said that, regardless of what happens to you, how can I put this? One of the things that I say to the congregation sometimes is we talk about church hurt. And so I think I can make this, I can make a parallel with this. We talk about church hurt, and I always tell them it is not the church who hurt you. There's a few people in the church that have hurt you, but you have used this blanket statement that you don't like church, or you're recovering from church hurt. Now, was it the church that hurt you, or was it one or two individuals that hurt you? And so in that same lens, I will say to them, regardless of the hurt, God has told us over and over and over that we're going to have trials and tribulations. Yeah. He didn't give us an example of what they would actually look like, but we have experienced some of those. So through all the trials and tribulations that you've gone through, God says still to love. Yeah. Regardless. And love has no color. No color lens, no filters, it's just love. Yeah. And so regardless of what we've gone through, regardless of our experiences with races, different ethnicities, different cultures, we're still supposed to love. And I said, do the God thing, still love. I said, we used to carry around the moniker, what would Jesus do? WWJD. Right. Yeah. So what would Jesus do? Pick up the book. It tells you what he would do.
That's right. And this is a great text for that.
Exactly. It tells you exactly what to do. So in that being, we still have to all coexist. We see the bumper sticker that people have on their cars that says coexist, and it has all the symbolism of all these different religions. You still have to respect that person regardless of what they personally feel about, say, Jesus or Freud or Buddha. They still have their own opinion, but can we all coexist in the same world? Yes, we can. I think it was Paul who said, I am all things to all men. And basically he says, hey guys, check this out. I have a solid relationship with Christ. That is never going to change. But should I be able to sit down at the table and talk to somebody who does not follow Christ? Yes, I should. We should be able to have those hard conversations. Now, my goal, talking from Paul's point of view, is that hopefully that they'll see a glimpse of Christ in me that will cause them to want to continue this conversation about Christ. But my goal is not to fall into what they are serving to me, because I know who my God is. I know where I come from. But I have to sit and listen, because everybody has their own point of view and everybody has an opinion. And if we're able to sit and have the adult conversation without letting our feelings get in the way, then we can fix so many things. But sometimes just the whole thing of our flesh and being how could I say this? I don't want to say the wrong thing. Being the victim. We can't always be the victim. We at some point have to be a victor. You know, and I look at that through trials and tribulations. I always tell people trials and tribulations equal triumph. If you can get through them, you are destined to be victorious. You are destined to be triumphant, in regardless of what we go through. Because I think about it, if I would have let race stop me from all the things that I've been trying to do post-save days, you know, I wouldn't be where I am now. I mean, there are a lot of things that I could have let stop me. You know, people look at it and they say, well, everybody in the military is the same, and that's not exactly true. There's at some point, and I don't know if it's still there now, I've been out for some while now, but there's a system of racial injustice in the military. You know, and people say, well, how? They don't treat, I said, yeah, but I said on paper they can treat you different.
Okay.
You know, promotions, they can treat you different.
Sure.
You know,
Sure.
They get to see you. I said, when we do a promotion, when they do promotions in the military, they have a picture of who you are. And sometimes they lay those pictures by side with your military record, and you may go 1 for 1 all the way up. And then that last choice, what could it be? Sometimes it was race. You know, is that a fact that we probably could prove right now? Probably not. But it's been there. And so I tell the congregation, I said, regardless of what you receive, still give love, because love is going to win regardless. It's going to win, and man, I stand on that, regardless of what we go through. At the end, if God has the last say so, love is going to win. And even with, like I said, with a lot of people retracting old statements, companies are starting to do new things when it comes to should I say elevating, if I could use the word, people of color. How long is that going to last if your heart's not really in it, if you really don't believe it? Are you doing it just to make a quick fix, or are you doing it because you really believe this is going to work? You know, in today's generation, you know, our new generation with the millennials, they have a whole different outlook on this versus where we came from, because they've been in a society where they've been, should I say, commingled together for a long time. You know, and so they get to see both sides. But, you know, at some point we were isolated. I didn't always go to a school that had whites in it until I got bussed out. And then that was a whole different thing, and I learned some things from that. And I'm going to stop talking after this and let you talk. But one of the things I remember, I was at Whitefish Bay High School, and one of the other players invited me over to his house after school to hang out and have dinner. So, Chad, believe this, you know, some people probably going to trip on what I'm about to say, but hey, I'm just being real. So we're there. We end up sitting at the table, the whole family and me, eating. No TV. You know, the whole family. Mother, father, brothers and sisters, and Craig, having conversation. I didn't come from that. The only time I saw that was watching Leave It to Beaver. But here I am thrust into it, and I'm looking at this, and I'm like, I want this. I want this. This is what I want. You know, and that stuck with me. That gave me a goal. And that was one of the goals, that one day I'm going to be able to sit down at the table with my family, even though we don't practice this at the Browns' house. But when I'm over, and my friend was Dan Cohen, when I'm over Dan Cohen's house, we're sitting at the table, talking, having serious conversations. It's not one-sided. You know, I'm like, yo, y'all have an opinion. You know, in my house, you do what I tell you to do, when I tell you to do, how I tell you to do it.
So you saw the interaction.
The interaction was totally different. You know, and I say that because it was a family setting. Now, did my father have conversation with me and it was just me and him? Yes, we did have that. But it wasn't when we were all at the table. All my brothers and sisters and my mom and dad, we ain't never, when I was a kid growing up, sat at the table, had a dinner, and had conversation. That was, I mean, really, I mean, it was like the cherry on top of the cake for dessert after dinner. We didn't have that. And so when I was able to experience that, these are things that I picked up that, okay, this is cool, this is good stuff. You know, and then I see it, and I look again and say we're shaped by our environments, right? Those are some of the environmental things that a lot of families are missing. And that's on both sides.
Yeah.
But those are some things that will help us not depend on the State House or the White House. What are those meaningful conversations that you're having in your house that's helping to shape your worldview, so to speak?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And gosh, so many things that you said just triggered so many thoughts for me. I think worldview is a significant piece in all of this.
Right.
And most of the people in my congregation come from what's described as a worldview that is guilt-innocence.
Okay.
And we think more along the lines of being an individual. Am I guilty of something? Have I done something wrong?
Right. I
Or
can see
and the highest value or the thing that we would strive for is innocence, right? We want to be innocent, so we obey the law. So we, when we look at a situation, we very quickly look at, are people doing the right things or the wrong things?
Or the wrong things, right.
And that's one of the ways that we discern or judge what's going on, or how we read or interpret or receive someone. So very individualistic, very conscious of rightness or wrongness or guilt.
Right.
As I've understood, lots of folks from different parts of the world, and primarily people of color, are more on a shame honor type worldview. Now, these are generalizations,
No, I understand.
But this shame honor, where the highest value is honor, or being higher than someone else, and if I can shame them, then I appear to go up the rung, right? I see this on the basketball court all the time, right? If I can get somebody, shake them out of their shoes, and everybody's like, oh, and I don't do that ever, but I see people do it, right? I wish I could, but there's that example of shame honor at work,
right?
And we see it in all different parts of the world, But one of the advantages, or one of the cool things in all of that, is the sense of communal. The community. It's not individualistic. It's what are we together? What do we experience? And so that's where the death of George Floyd or Breonna Taylor, or you go on down the list, and like each one of those, like a white person might look at that and say, well, that's just one person in Minneapolis. How does that affect? But it's not. Like, what would you say to?
I mean, if you look at it, so everybody has seen what happened to Ahmaud Arbery, what happened to George Floyd, and some of the other ones that have happened in the past that were actually caught on tape. But if you look at the way, and I'm just thinking about this now, that the way the world has galvanized behind the movement of injustice, not. And I think when we're saying injustice, it's not just for the people of color, but it's for everybody. Because if we go back and look in the Bible, there were tons and tons of injustices on the people. And the people are coming together for one fight, one cause, to bring in change. When I think about as you were kind of mentioning, like a hierarchy type thing, the guilt versus shame, and this is me, I don't want my counterparts, you, to be shamed or guilted into making a decision to make things better. I want you to truly understand and know that there's been injustices, or that, and it has happened over the course of several hundred years. Okay, I know that you can't go back and fix it, but I know that if we start fresh now, we can make a change. So the thing with George Floyd is everybody getting together, unifying to make that change. Again, I don't know the hearts of all of those people in the protests. From Portland to Portland, Maine, across the ocean to Germany and England and all those other places. Everything is going on. I don't know, if anybody has a hidden agenda, but what I've been seeing is people coming together for one common cause to fight injustice. And people are starting to speak out. And sometimes I think you just need to know that other people think a little bit like you so you can actually have a voice to say something. Sometimes we need to know that we have other people on our team, because I can see that it's scary to speak up or speak truth to power. And that was one of the things that, man, I stood on in my military career. I don't care if you was Private Brown to Major 2-star or 3-star General Brown. If you were doing something that didn't line up to the values that I learned in the military, I was gonna call you on it. I was gonna be that dude that asked that question that everybody looks like, oh, no, he didn't just ask the general that. No, it's a true question. One of my soldiers asked me in Iraq. He said, "Sergeant Brown, why are we here?"
Wow.
And I was like, "What do you mean? Why are we here on Earth? Or why are we here in Iraq?" He said, "Well, I already know why we're here on Earth. I'm talking about Iraq." And I said, "Man, I wish I could answer that question." I said, because I've heard so many different reasons why we're here. And I said, I don't have an answer to that. Again, there's a young person somewhere asking, why is this happening? And the majority of the people don't have the answer. And we have to be able to get to that table, to have that conversation, so when those questions are asked on both sides, we have the right answer. Not the answer we want to give them, the right answer, and the truthful answer. And sometimes the truth hurts. And we just have to understand, hey, this stuff happened. All right, we can't bring it back. We can't get a do-over. What are we going to do from this point on? How are we going to work this thing? And it's not just about giving up positions so another person of color can get the position. It's not about payment, reparations, or any of that, because all that stuff will dissipate, and we will find ourselves right back where we started at. It'll be just like the children of Israel. We're walking in a circle, and we got to get out of that circle pattern, and we got to start moving in the direction that God wants us to go as a people. As one people, as one race, because you and I know, and I'm sure we both have probably said this maybe in different ways, that when we eventually find ourselves in heaven, there's not going to be a white side, a black side. There's not going to be a Baptist or a Catholic. There's not going to be a Presbyterian or a Lutheran. We are all going to be one family. The way we all started out. We came from Adam and Eve, from one family. And I mean, gosh, the melanated. My daughter, as you see, has a different skin color than I. But we're part of the same family. And I have hues of colors, of shades throughout my whole family. There are Caucasians in my family. I looked at a picture of my great-great-grandfather, and my mom said, that was my great-great-grandfather. I said, no, he's not. That man is white. And she said, no, that is your great-great-grandfather. But he was really, really light. And he had hair the texture of yours. I'm serious. And I was like, wow. But then after I look at generation and generation of my family, I was like, okay. And I was like, okay, when Aja was born, I was like, whoa, this baby's really light. And I looked at my own color. I looked at my wife, and I was like, hold on, we're both kind of dark. What is this? And then when I saw her face, I was like, wow, she looks just like my sister. And I have a sister that is the same complexion of Aja. Then I have a sister who's my complexion. But we're all part of the same family. And so I just see that if we could just look at race from a standpoint of, some of us stayed in the sun a little bit too long, and others didn't, but we're all related. We all come from the same rib. And how do we get everybody to understand that? People are saying, well, where's the church at now? This is a hard question for the church, because the church is so divided. Not only based on the different denominations and religions, but the people in the church are divided. So how can a divided people answer a question that's going to take teamwork?
That's very true and accurate. I mean, do we dare venture into Facebook land? And try to figure out what's true,
what's exactly,
what's accurate,
Right.
what's legitimate. And I went downtown. I went downtown Sunday night.
Okay.
I have sort of this standing commitment that if a black pastor asks me to do something,
Right.
and I can make it happen, I'm going to go.
Okay.
So I got invited to go pray.
Okay.
It wasn't just praying,
Right.
but the irony and the inconsistency and the, dare I call it, hypocrisy
Okay.
of what was being shouted down there. Now, most of that didn't come from the group of people that I ended up being invited to be a part of.
Right.
But just here we are trying to talk about, a hopeful kind of influence
Right.
and praying, but also just there's sort of this sense that everything's focused on the police right now, right? And that the police are prejudiced, that the police are racially motivated and moving things in that direction and making decisions along those lines. And if I just kind of pull it back, and I just want to pull it back from that and say, okay, if that's essentially what the police are being accused of and what they're doing, some of the things that are being said about the police, it's kind of the same thing.
Yeah.
Like, all cops are, and then there's a name that they were calling them.
Right.
All cops are, it wasn't pigs.
Right.
But like, just this sense of, okay, you're accusing them of the same thing that you're doing to them. If I'm only listening, right? Since I function as an individual,
Right.
and I look at right and wrong,
Right.
I'm looking at this and I'm going, this is so inconsistent and hypocritical. But yeah, the agendas and everything that get attached to it, I've been amazed at how many like other things have been attached to the discussion and the governmental
Right.
attempts and the agendas that are a part of this.
Yeah. I mean, man, there's always, from a political standpoint, there's always a hidden agenda in there for the most part. I mean, but from the church, our only agenda should be Christ. Our only
100%.
agenda should be love. Our only agenda should be bringing people together, not dividing people. Because it's easy to divide people. We see it every Sunday. People who look more like you come to your church. People who look more like me come to my church. We have some sprinkles in there. You have some sprinkles in there. But for the most part, as they've always said, Sunday is the most segregated day of the week. How do we fix that? One of the things, and you can correct me or stop me on this, but one of the things that I've always noticed, especially since becoming a pastor, and really don't know why this is, but considering we're kind of dealing with race and the way that we operate, in a sense, I look at where there will be people of color from the inner city will leave the inner city and go to a church in the suburbs who the pastor is white. But how many times have you seen somebody from the suburbs who is white who comes down to the inner city to go to a predominantly black church? It really happens. And I think the reason for that is sometimes people of color want to detach themselves from the oppression that they have lived through to get a different sense of, and if this person is speaking to their heartstrings, so to speak. And again, pastors, everybody doesn't know where pastors' heart is. There are some pastors now, probably in the state of Oregon, in the state of Washington, who are white, who have not even addressed what's going on in socially now, and they have people of color in their congregations. how do you deal with that? How do we deal with that piece? Again, that's that conversation about race.
Yeah.
That, if anything, I think the best place to have that conversation would be the church.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think that is the great place to have it.
Yeah. Why do you think the church would be a great place to have this conversation?
Because I think our focus is everybody. And it's not just one side or the other side, but it's everybody. And what we're trying to get is get each other to understand how we feel about the issues that we deal with on a day-to-day. I want you to understand what it feels like to be black.
Yeah.
To feel that you have to prove yourself every single day just to get a leg up. I want you to realize that you could be profiled, just by the color of your skin. I've been in stores where I've been in Nordstrom's walking around with my wife, and all of a sudden I was like, is this person following me? And my wife is one of those people, she'll pick something up from the dresses, carry it over to the shoe department, put that together, and walk upstairs to the kids department. And because, number one, my wife shops, it's hard for her to shop, so she'll have a basket or a handful of stuff going from the department to department. And I'm like, they're following us because they think she's going to. Why do they think that?
Yeah.
And then there's somebody who they should be watching, who doesn't look like my wife, who's getting away with it. But these are the things that we deal with because of the stigmatism that has been ingrained to most of American society, that black people are not right all the time.
Yeah.
And so that happens because every time you turn on the TV, even before this, every time they would show something, they always show something happened in the black community, and it wasn't always good. The majority of it was something. Or you see a fake Facebook post and a lady's getting pulled out of the store because they say she was shoplifting, but she's black. And so every time you see those, what I call time stamps, that stuff is ingrained in your brain. And you start to think, well, this is what it is. And some people bring their kids up like that because that's what they've seen. Yeah. Prime example, the lady in New York with the dog who say, hey, I'm going to call the police. And she knew, even though she knew what she was doing was wrong, but because she didn't want to be corrected by someone who did not look like her.
Interesting.
That's what I believe. And so when he says, you need to have your dog on a leash in the park, it's a rule, it's a law at that particular park. Now the question is, if it had been someone who looked like her, what would her response have been?
No, that's.
And think about it, because of what's been happening in just our nation alone. What if the police had have shown up? Right? What if he didn't have it on videotape of her response? Yeah. That could have went a whole nother way.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. Yeah. And Craig, I appreciate again us being able to have this conversation and you saying you want me to understand what it's like. I want to. I'm willing to.
Right.
But I don't know that I ever fully can comprehend it.
Right.
Right.
And see,
because I have a barrier.
Right.
To that.
Exactly. And that's when, and I think even with the comprehending part, for the most part, when we're speaking out, we went from protests to rioting. Right. Martin Luther King said that rioting is basically the language of the unheard, because after we've been yelling for so long, hear my pain, see my pain, can you sympathize with me? Empathize with what I'm going through, what I've been dealing with for years now. Then it goes, it escalates. And so, well, you're not going to hear me while we can just have this conversation. Well, maybe you hear me now when I throw this brick through the window. And then again, there's a give and take on that. But it's people shouting out Are you listening to me now? Can you hear me now? And it worked. I mean, I don't condone looting.
Yeah.
I don't condone violence or destroying anybody's property. But if we look at what's going on now, all the protests have become peaceful for the most part. People are changing the way that they, from the outside looking in, people are changing the way that they view things.
Yeah.
And they're starting, and the people who had been silent,
Yeah.
basically your silence was, implicit. Now they're saying this is wrong. And people are starting to hearing, because it's not the people who are yelling, but the people who are receiving it, who are now starting to see it from like, wow, what have I been missing?
Yeah.
I've been looking at this from the term of right and wrong, but I've been looking at right and wrong, but I've only been looking at the right and wrong they have been doing, not the right and wrong that we have been doing by either being silent or by agreeing with it, because I didn't want to be the one to speak truth to power.
Yeah.
I want to be in the safe zone.
Yeah.
Too many of us have been in the safe zone too long, and it's time to come out of that.
You said, Chad, I want you to feel what it's like to be a black person. I responded with, I want to comprehend it.
Right.
Right? Even in that, there's a difference.
Yes.
Right? The difference is comprehend is here. Feeling is here.
Exactly.
And what you're wanting me to do is feel it here.
Right. And even with the comprehend part, like I said, like you said, there's a barrier there.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can comprehend it, but then you leave here and you go to your neighborhood.
Right.
Basically, I leave
Which
here.
is right here.
Right.
You're going to Vancouver, man.
Right.
Come on.
But when I was in high school, I would leave Whitefish Bay and go back to inner city Milwaukee.
Yeah.
Worlds, they're only probably maybe 10 miles apart, but it was like worlds apart. And I would come back home and be like, wow, this is different.
But I think for me, this is kind of a light bulb moment almost, that like you're wanting me to feel, I'm saying my feeling comes through my comprehending. Right. So to get to my heart, you have to go through my head. Right. And I think that's part of what people who look like me are really struggling with right now.
Yeah.
Because what I see, I can't comprehend it, right? And there's so much confusion. But in order to really feel it, like you would ask or want of me, it has to come. It kind of the pathway goes through my head. Right.
So even with that, there's this thing I would say, and I got it from my pastor. He would always talk about your Athens and your Jerusalem.
Oh.
And he said, when your Athens and your Jerusalem connect, he said, you have all the understanding you need, because your heart and mind are now one. And he said, when we tell people, to think with their hearts, we're not telling that, because a lot of people say when we talk about the heart, they think about the heart that actually pumps blood.
Right.
And we're talking from a spiritual aspect where those two should connect. That my feeling and my thinking should be synonymous. And so how do we garner that? How do we bring that together? And that's the biggest thing. But I totally understand it is hard for you to comprehend how I feel, because it would take you going back in history with me and then making that walk up, which again, but because of who you are and the way you feel, and the heart that you have, not only for God but for God's people, that you are willing to open your heart and open your mind and have that conversation. I don't know. I think the only other tandem of people I've seen had this conversation was T.D. Jakes and I think the pastor of Elevation Church.
Wow.
They had a dialogue similar to this. But we're not the people that make the laws.
Yeah, right.
Can those people sit at the table and talk about it? Can Republicans and Democrats stop being Republican and Democrat and just be people and have this honest conversation? Do we have to, use a church as prop or use Kente Claus as prop to try to bring people together? Because those things aren't going to let you feel what I've been feeling, or deal with the things that I go through, or just the very nature of having to wake up knowing I'm going to get in my car and drive across the bridge to Portland. Am I going to make it safe? You know, how many times have you had to think about that?
Not for the same reasons.
Right. And so even when I'm driving, I remember I got stopped one time. Me and my wife and Aja were coming back from northern Seattle. Her cousin was living there, and we were driving back. And granted, when he pulled me over, I was speeding. It was late, man. I was flying. I had to be doing about 80 or 90. He flashed his lights, and I pulled over to the left, and we stopped. And he said, "What are you doing? You should have pulled over to the right." And I was like, "So do you want me to pull over?" And so he looked. He said, "Yeah, we're gonna." So I drove, and then I waited. You know, drove a little bit faster to get ahead, so we could get over to the curb, or to the median, or to the curb, and so shoulder rather. So we got over to the shoulder. He came, and I remember so vividly. I had my hand on the steering wheel, and he said, "Where are you coming from?" I said, "I'm coming from Seattle." "What were you doing up there?" It's like visiting a relative. "Did you know you were speeding?" And I was like, "Yes, I know I was speeding. I mean, dead to right."
Yeah.
And so Angie was saying, "Craig, don't say anything." So he started asking me all this barrage of questions that had nothing to do with speeding. And then he said, after he asked me all this, then he asked me for my driver's license and my insurance card.
Oh, wow.
So I gave it to him, and then he said, "You wait right here." And I'm like, "Where am I going to go? You got my driver's license and my insurance card. Am I going to take off?" And he came back probably about 15 minutes later, because I was like, Angie said, "What's taking him so long?" I said, "I'm sure he's running the plates. I'm sure he's probably called back to Wisconsin," because I still have my Wisconsin driver's license, "to see if I'm legit." And she's like, "This is just taking too long." And he came back and he said, "Well, who's that sitting in the car with you?" I said, "That's my wife." And he said, "Well, where are you guys going?" I said, "I'm going home." And then I said, "Officer," I said, "are you going to give me a ticket?" Because I said, I would really appreciate it. I said, "It's late. I got my wife in the car, as you just noticed. My daughter's in the back. It's midnight. We're trying to get home." I was like, "I will just take the ticket. Whatever you write the ticket for, I deserve it, because I was speeding." And he said, "Here, take your license." And he said, "Next time, watch your speed." And I was like, this dude held me for about 30 plus minutes. And, you know, what was this for? So from that point on, those things make me nervous. Every time I see blue lights behind me and I ain't doing nothing wrong, I'm like, okay, am I getting pulled over? You know, when I'm walking to different stores, you know, where we're places where a lot of people of color don't frequent, I'm like, okay, what's going on with this? When are we going to get to the Rodney King level where we're all just, can we all get along?
Boy, yeah. So I asked you what you say to your congregation. What I say to mine is, especially in this time, you know, to listen, but beyond that, it's, what does God's word say?
Right. I mean, that's our fail-safe. We can't go wrong with that.
Well, and it's our final authority, right?
Yes.
For life, for godliness. And so when we talk about, you know, can government people, Republicans, Democrats, sit down and talk? Well, they could. But what we as the church have is this as our final authority. So it doesn't matter as much what I say or what you say. It's what does God's word say?
God's word say, exactly.
What does it tell us about ourselves, about God, about each other, and ultimately about everybody? And one of the things I love, right? So my son graduated this year.
Oh, congrats.
Senior, right?
Okay.
And one of the things, obviously, that he was lamenting and missing was a graduation, right? Having that full experience.
Right.
And I, too, for him. But one of the things that I loved about Roosevelt's graduations was the diversity.
Okay, yeah.
And not just black and white, like Hispanic,
right.
Polynesian,
right.
And you see the varieties of people and the celebration that's taking place.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, I look at that and go, okay, the focus is not on the Lord, but this might be the closest to a taste of heaven.
Right.
That I might feel in this life.
Right. Exactly.
That we're all together celebrating and cheering the accomplishments of these graduates. But one day, we're going to be together with our Savior, celebrating
like crazy,
and rejoicing.
Hey, I told him it's the white party of all white parties. Everybody's going to be dressed in white.
Well, I have a feeling that we're going to be getting down a little more like you all get down than we do on our side. Right?
But it's going to be a party, and we'll all be there together. And I think when you said that this is the final authority, and I think that's where, now that I think about it, when people are asking where the church is, I think they understand that this is the final authority, and why aren't we using it to bring people to the table to talk? The thing is that because, again, I'll go back to it, is that because we have people in our congregations who are divided on this very topic that we're talking about. Right. How do we get everyone, to see it through God's eyes and not through their own eyes? But again, it goes from personal experiences, how you were brought up in your home, what was taught in your home, all those different things. And so Tony Evans is right. It starts first at our homes. What are we teaching at homes? Kids don't grow up being prejudiced or racist. It's taught. It's taught. It's either taught within the family or in the community in which they grow up. I use my daughter in a lot of illustrations from some time because she was so naive and so green that, she was born in Germany. We lived on a military post. We were there for 10 years. And when she came to the States to live for the first time, she was 8 years old.
Wow, okay.
And so there were some things that she was accustomed to doing in Germany that I couldn't allow her to do here in the States. One of those things was go outside and play. Just in the yard, because when we first moved, we lived in an apartment complex, but it was really nice complex. And she was like, well, can I go outside? Well, no, somebody has to be with you. Why? In Germany, I didn't have to have that. This is not Germany, and this is not a military post, totally different. I have to know where you are. I need to be out there with you probably. You can't go by yourself. And so those were some things that she realized that were different. She realized that the way that people responded to each other was different. Because again, we're in a military concern. We got high schools, grade schools, daycare. So that melting pot or that tossed salad of people grew up in that environment. And so when you take them out of that and put them in something totally new that they're not accustomed to, she started to see it. And she said, this is not the same. School is not the same. She was like, you have she said, Dad, I went to school and we were in the lunchroom and it was like it was divided. I was like, what do you mean? She said, people of color were sitting on one side and, there are people of the other color sitting on one side. There were a few that were intermingled. And I said, where did you sit? And she said, I didn't like what I saw the first time. And I just kind of stood there. But she had a variety of friends. And so she gravitated to the group that was sitting in the variety because people are a product of their environments. And one of the things that I look at is when kids are kids, what experiences are they getting? Again, and that comes from, most of the military kids get a lot of experience that kids just in the States don't get. Being in other countries, learning other languages, seeing the difference in the cultures and things like that, or really starting to understand the differences in the cultures. And then, in the States, we don't have all those opportunities. So when I look at a lot of the kids that I knew who were kids growing up in Germany, and I see what they're doing now, and I was like, they have a good worldview because they've had the opportunity to experience a lot of different things when a lot of times here we didn't. And so that shapes how we think, how we look at the world, how we look at life, how we even view the church. Because a lot of the people, I'm sure, when you were out there downtown, a lot of those people who were probably yelling some of the stuff that they were probably yelling probably don't even attend church. For one reason or another. Or there are some who did attend church, but because they were hurt in church for one reason or another. This is their view, or God didn't answer when they wanted it to be answered. And so God or God allowed my mother to die, or whatever the case, because they never had a good grasp on what the word is, what it stands for, and how God explains why all these things happen.
Yeah.
And so, we have to be able to even to galvanize that group of people and get them to understand how we see things through Christ and through his word.
Yeah.
Because I tell people, I said, even in this pandemic, God still has a promise. And I'm standing on that. I'm standing on that.
His promise isn't going anywhere.
No, it's not going anywhere.
Yeah.
I said the pandemic is nothing but another trial or tribulation. This too shall pass.
Yeah.
And his promises which will be there. And I said the biggest promise that he made to me is he said he would never leave me nor forsake me. So I'm good.
Yeah.
But can I transfer that so everybody else understands that? Can I be able to get people to see that persecution didn't just start here in the United States? It started in here, and it's illustrated in here.
Yeah.
And at the end of it all, it shows the people working together to get out of bondage, getting in their own way until they finally really got free. And then when they did get free, what did they do? A lot of the stuff they learned growing up, it was transferred. So how do we break that chain?
Yeah. Well, and the root of prejudice, racism, whatever, is our own sinful, wicked hearts.
Exactly.
And what a sinful, wicked heart does that is not regenerated by Christ is reproduce sinful, wickedness.
Exactly.
and
it's reproduced in the people.
Yeah. And I guess, I spent 3 years in Southern Africa, next door to apartheid, next door to South Africa and Swaziland. And when you got the roots of apartheid that are there, and I was doing ministry with an international group of students. It was a school. Right. It was a boarding school. And that shaped my thinking, right? This, skinny white farm kid goes to Southern Africa after a stop in Portland for college, and that shaped me. I wasn't a student at the school. I was trying to minister to those students. Right. But that experience, similar to yours, shaped me in that it gave me a very different perspective on the capacities and capabilities of people. Yeah. And the impact of being able to come to a table and have a conversation. To be able to talk about those differences. Yeah, which, Craig, I really appreciate you. I feel like we could keep going.
Oh, man, we probably could talk for this for days.
I agree.
We might have to add volumes to this.
We should.
Yeah.
I'm down with that.
I'm down with it too, man.
So one of the questions that I sort of followed up with is, you to your congregation, what do I say to my congregation? But what would you say to my congregation?
Wow, I would say to, again, you said it earlier, to listen. I would say to listen and watch. And if you can, close your eyes and just picture yourself in that position. Close your eyes and picture yourself in George Floyd's position. Close your eyes and picture yourself in Ahmaud Arbery's position. Close your eyes and picture yourself in Breonna Taylor's position. That she was in her home, in her bed. Yeah. Arbery's going for a run in a neighborhood he probably had ran through several times. George Floyd, on the street, being compliant to what the officers are asking him, but then all of a sudden he ends up on the ground. Can you think about that? And I used to tell that to my soldiers. We would do our missions through Iraq, and there were times we had to go door knocking. That means we went house to house. Most of the time, they know what we're looking for. We're looking for weapons. Yeah. We're looking for IEDs. We're looking for people who manufacture them. But one of the things that happened a couple of times is that my soldiers would be a little bit too forceful, and they would destroy property, tear people's houses. And I was like, hey man, we don't do this. I'm not sure if you did it in those other platoons you were, but here in my platoon we don't do that. Yeah. We are to be courteous. We are to be very respectful. I understand that you guys are looking at them as they are the enemy. A lot of these people here aren't the enemy. They're caught between the two factions, so to speak.
Yeah.
I said it's our job to bring peace. And I said, even when we're bringing peace, we had to look at some of the methods and some of the things we're doing.
Yeah.
Bringing peace. I used to say that the road to hell is paved in gold. I said, because these people are looking at us. Some of us are looking at us as we're the heroes. We're coming to save today. I said, but at the same time as we're coming to save today, we're actually sometimes we're messing stuff up. They just got their electricity turned on. They have power now, but they got low-hanging electrical wires coming off the poles. My striker has his tall antenna pole, and we're coming back through the neighborhood, and we're ripping their power out. We started off being heroes, and now we're not anymore. I said, so we have to be mindful of what we're doing, how we're trying to fix things. Sometimes in our quest to fix things, we mess things up. Same thing, some of the things that they're doing now to try to fix things, are they really fixing them, or are they setting us up for failure in the future? Because my thing was, I told my platoon, my heart is in this. I feel for this. I said, we get to leave here, if we make it out of here, and we get to go back home, where life is totally different. I said, even when we uproot and leave as the entire military, I said, man, I know from history, from reading my Bible, these people are going to go back to doing exactly what they were doing before we came. Why? Because it's their lifestyle. This is the way they live. You can't change that in a few years. This is something that's been going on way before us, and we can't change it just like that. And I said, because they're used, who's to say that they just didn't enjoy the way they were comfortable, the way they were living? But we consider that we're going to come here and we're going to fix it. And I believe that we came. There were some things we did fix, but there was also a lot of things that we messed up. And a lot of it had to do that we should have had a thorough understanding of the people that we were advocating for and the people that we were supposed to get rid of, so to speak, to make things better. But we didn't have. There was enough time to get us all ready for that. That would have taken years of study for us to even just to be able to understand that, to make that actually happen. And so again, it's not going to happen overnight here. These quick, as I call them, quick fixes, they're just quick. They're temporary. We need something long lasting. And I believe that the church could really provide it if first we all got to get on the same sheet of music. And if we could all do that, I think everything else would start to fall in place. If we're following God, people are going to follow us as long as we're leading them to the right place. But we got to come together as one to be able to do it.
Well, let's keep working on that.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
I'll say this to you and your congregation. One of the things that I have heard as I've listened is many of my black friends and brothers and sisters in Christ feel less than. I'm fighting those feelings, feeling unvalued. And I just want to say, like, from Pastor Chad to St. Paul Missionary Baptist Church, to my brothers and sisters there, you are valuable.
Amen.
Not because I say it. I don't have any authority to make you valuable. But I acknowledge it because I acknowledge the value that God places on you. And we stand in the same place before an almighty God. Hopefully, what Paul tells the Ephesians, this is what you once were. You walked in your wickedness. You walked in your sinful ways. That doesn't matter what race or ethnicity or socioeconomic status we have. Where do we stand before God? In our sin. We're all in the same place. Guilty. And yet we all have the same Savior who, if we receive by faith, we come into this family, right? I wish, brothers and sisters kind of mix it up a little bit every once in a while. and that's okay.
Yeah, and I mean, it is. Those are the hard conversations.
Yeah.
One of the things that I would always tell Aja is sometimes you're gonna have them hard conversations. You don't run from those.
Yeah.
You don't revert. And a lot of times, I think what happens is when those conversations get extremely uncomfortable, we run for shelter. We run for, because we can't take it, because it brings up a lot, and I think those conversations becoming uncomfortable does bring up some guilt on both sides.
Yeah, sure.
And it makes you think like, wow, this is, but I got to sit here and we got to have this conversation, and the conversation there should be a catapult, or a foundation of it should come from the past. But as we progress to the present day and age, from that point we should be saying, okay, what's the solution? How do we fix this? You've heard, you've listened to what I've said. You may even have a sense of how I've been feeling. So now how do we move forward? How do we move forward as one people, as the human race?
Yeah.
How do we do that?
Yeah.
But because a lot of things are so rooted and ingrained, it's going to be hard to reprogram people. It's kind of like when our kids were younger and they would go to somebody's house and they would come back and be doing stuff that we know we didn't allow them to do at our house. I was like, yeah, we got to reprogram her right now, because she's been over there for a week and she's, we got to reprogram it. And that's what we need. We need to be reprogrammed. To see things. And I think if people could look at this as a tool of change, and I'm talking about the Bible as a tool of change, versus they think, we're doing the fire and brimstone thing. We're just chastising everybody for what they've done. If they can understand that Craig and Chad were Craig and Chad before they were Pastor Chad and Pastor Craig. And there are some things that we did that we're not proud of, and that we understand that everybody has their progression to change.
Yeah.
It wasn't like I was called right out of my sinful nature to be a pastor. It didn't happen like that. There was some setup coming on. God was setting me up for some
by
things.
God's grace, right?
Yeah, exactly.
There's some wisdom there.
Yeah,
he knows what he's doing.
What he was doing, and so he had to, change some things within me, the way I thought about things, the way I looked about things, the way I acted. He had to change a lot of that, and he's still doing it even now.
Yeah.
I'm not perfect, and I'll tell St. Paul every Sunday. I tell people that if they want to be a member at St. Paul, I said, if you want to be a member of this church, we are not a perfect church, because we are not perfect people.
Yeah.
We all have our issues. Some of us are still going through our issues, but we are a church that is looking to Christ for all our answers.
Yeah. Praise the Lord. That's good. So I every Sunday tell University Park, my sort of closing, let's go, is go and be transformed.
That's good.
Right?
That's good.
And that's sort of twofold. Go and be changed by this message.
Right.
But also go and live a changed life.
Right. And that's, oh man, you touched something. And that's what bothers me. That gets me. That we can go and we can sit in church and hear these words and know that this is coming from God's vessel. God is using us as his mouthpiece to preach his word. And people feel it. They feel it in here.
Yeah.
But they hit them doors, man. Yeah. And things is like, okay, I've clocked in today. I've clocked in my hour and a half. It's time to clock out now. Let me go back to doing what I was doing.
Sort of tying together some of what we've already talked about. It's that heart and head connection.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? You can feel it in the pew on Sunday.
Yeah.
But does it connect with the head?
Is your Athens and your Jerusalem connecting now?
So we talk about head, heart, and hands.
Right.
Those three things are necessary to be connected for anything to be changed.
Definitely.
Well, we're going to end our conversation here.
Okay.
For now.
Okay.
I appreciate your time. I appreciate
I appreciate you inviting me. This has been great. I mean, just to be able to talk and be transparent.
Yeah.
And I think and I hope our viewing parties out there take this to heart, that hey, this was not scripted. We are sitting here having a real conversation. The conversation everybody should be having right about now. So,
Yeah. Well, I love you,
Love
and
you
I
too.
am so thankful that we can be brothers
Yes.
in the same community as a part of God's family.
definitely.
So thank you.
You're welcome.
So we're going to pause here.
Okay.
Because I want you to say it with me, the go and be transformed
Okay.
part.
All right.
So I'll edit this.
Okay.
This is me on the fly, right?
Okay.
So I'll do a greeting, and then we'll
In
say
unison,
it together. Yeah.
going to be transformed.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
All right.
So, church family, I'm thankful that you have stuck it out with us. I pray that you've been encouraged and strengthened by our conversation as we've sort of interacted with God's Word and with each other. As always, we're going to end the service the same way that we do each Sunday. And so, Craig, can you help me?
I got you.
All right, let's do this. Church,
Go and be transformed. Amen.
All right.
Amen, man. That was good. Thank you.